I want to try doing a homework in class. And it's basically going to be the same problems you do today with just a few things changed. Again, I'm going to bring up the clickers. We're going to go through each problem slowly, talk about it. I'm going to show you where on the worksheets the question refers to. And then Wednesday, we're going to repeat those same clicker questions. Just a few things changed. And it'll count as a homework. I already have today's clicker presentation, the little quiz, the questions. It's already up on the web right here with all the answers. What you might want to do is, as we're going through this, you'll want to have out your worksheets that we've been working on with demand elasticity. Because I'm going to be referring to it. And then you may want to be ready to take some notes. At the top, maybe put today's date, click this quiz. And as we go through the question, put number 1 or answer to it if there's anything that you think would help you with that question out of there. Do know that since you have these worksheets out, number 3 on the worksheet, we're talking about the thing called worksheet on supply and demand elasticity at the top. Number 3, you can cross it out. You're not going to go over it nor you responsible for it. In number 3, worksheet on supply and demand elasticity, cross it out. You will not be held responsible. Just listen to me for a moment to motivate this. In 17th century Russia, to fund all of Peter Great's wars, they applied taxes to everybody, rather hefty taxes. And at first they wanted to tax people they wanted to tax each household. So taxmen would go around, wherever there was a house, they charge them a tax. So there was a tax per roof. Well, that made having a house more expensive. And so the tax increases the price of something, people respond to it. What we're trying to do in these lectures and today is to think about whenever you increase the price of something, whether it be through a regulation or tax, people do respond to it. And to have a good tax or regulation, you want to think about how people respond. Back to 17th century Russia. Well, people before back then, so they said, well, the best way to lower the per person tax is let everybody live in the house together. So it didn't take long before they would start showing up to a house, and there would be one house, one roof, but lots of people living there. There was still one tax per house. And then started out with people responding to this. We're actually charging each person less than before. So they started adjusting it for the size of the house and number of people living in it. Well, the Russian peasants were still pretty clever, and they still did not want to pay taxes. And they didn't have big houses, and they wasn't made out of really heavy wood. They were kind of, how like a wattle fence is made. It was made out of kind of like wattle walls with mud heads in it. Well, they made it such that there were 4 corners, and at the foundation of each corner, it wasn't sunk in the ground. You could detach it from its foundation. And when the taxman came, they'd pick up the house, carry it into the woods, and go live in the woods for a while. When the taxman was gone, they'd come back and put it right back where it was. Again, people were responding to the tax. And you always have this problem when you try to tax something, people respond to it, and sometimes what happens in the end is something you don't really love. One thing we're seeing with some of the new health care bills, in a way, it's kind of like taxing bigger employers for having more people. If you were, say, McDonald's or Walmart and you hired low-wage employees, and before maybe you were not giving them any health insurance, or really, really low quality. And now, you're forced to give them better insurance. That's kind of like taxing them. But what they've learned, and I think one student mentioned this in the paper, I think they work at Walmart, is employers responded to it by trying to move away from full-time labor and towards part-time labor. And in many places, I've had people tell me Walmart, Lowe's, they're trying to get people They want more part-timers. They try to get people on full-time to move to part-time to avoid all this. And in the end, he may have been trying to help people, and maybe it still will help people overall. I don't know. But there are those effects that are bad that really do harm people that you need to think about. In the 80s, Congress decided it wanted more money and it wanted to get it from the rich people. And it didn't want to just go after income taxes, because that brings up this whole debate. They wanted a special tax that they could just hide in a bill and get through Congress for anybody noticing. They just wanted to tax the wealthy. So they said, what do the wealthy buy? They buy things like yachts. So they picked out goods like yachts that only rich people buy and say, we'll just tax that. And the thinking was, people are spending this amount of money on yachts. We tax them. They pay the same amount of money, buy the same number of yachts, and they pay us some more too. And the thinking was, rich people were rich enough, they were still going to buy yachts, even though there's a tax on them, we'll just get more money from the rich people. When in reality, the demand for yachts was surprisingly elastic. Demand was surprisingly sensitive to prices. And all of a sudden, people really started buying a lot less yachts. Surprisingly, everyone how much fuel they bought. And rich people, they took their money, they did something else with it. They have lots of options. Well, one group of people who didn't have any options available to them were people who made yachts. The people who made yachts were not rich people. They were ordinary people, most of them workers. Maybe sometimes low rate, sometimes middle class wage. Well, all of a sudden, people buying less yachts, that means if you work in a yacht factory, you might get laid off. You might get your hours cut, you might get your pay cut. And all of a sudden, the yacht sector did start having major problems. And they had to go to their politicians and beg them to get the tax removed, which eventually they did, and things went back to normal. So what this means is when you're thinking about taxes, you always want to think about what demand for good is like, whether people are sensitive to it or not. And then, it's kind of weird the way our economy works. You would think, since taxes discourage things, we would tax bad things. If you think global warming is a big problem, we should tax carbon. If you think the Mississippi River is really polluted, we should tax fertilizer. But instead, we tax something that's very good, work, income. And for a good reason. I'm not saying it's bad. But we have to acknowledge that when you punish people for making more money, they're probably going to make less money. And sometimes, if they were making money by being a bad person, that's good. But if they were making more money by producing good stuff for us, then that income tax may hurt us. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I worked on the summers at a place called Creek Plantation. It was a really big cutting horse creek. And it was something, you go there and you think you'd be in Oklahoma or Texas. Huge fields of cattle and horses everywhere, and they didn't have just white, it was like beautiful wooden fences almost everywhere. Horribly expensive, and cutting horses are very expensive. And the man who owned it was a man named Billy Morris. Billy Morris owned a lot of newspapers, especially in Georgia. Billy Morris was kind of into cutting horses. He came out to the ranch 3 times a year. The big event was the Augusta Futurity. And he would come up for a few days before then. They'd throw him on a horse. He'd have to remember how to ride. It'd be an ugly cut. And he'd go and compete and lose, and he'd go back home. Now what happened was he didn't really build Creek Plantation because it was always his dream to do that. It was the 70s. He was making a lot of money. And in the 70s, the income tax rate could be like 70%. In some cases, it was like 90%. So you're Billy Morris. You've already made lots of money. You make any more money, you only get 10% of it. Why would you try to make more money? Oh, he said, I'm not going to try to make any more money. In fact, I need to start losing money. And that's what he did. He said, I need to figure out something I could sink my money into, and it will lose a lot of money, my income rates will go down, and I get a little bit of enjoyment from it. And that's where Creek Plantation came from. Now, it was good in some ways. He liked it, a couple times a year he went out there. The people like me who worked on it, we got a job. But if you go out there and you look at it, it's kind of sad to see it because beautiful fields, beautiful fences, huge stables, indoor arenas, and 3 people there. There's hardly anybody there anymore. All that money went to a place and it's getting almost no value. It would have been better if he would have invested that money somewhere else, tried to make more money, build something where he makes money by giving us something that we want. Maybe a new paper in a new town, a better paper. I don't know, something. But that income tax rate discouraged him. And it caused, and we lost out on that as well. That doesn't mean we should abolish income taxes. The point of all this is to think very clearly and deliberately about what we're taxing and what's going to happen. And the end question of this clicker presentation is from a real example. When I was in North Carolina, the Attorney General's office they were about to sue the hog producers of North Carolina. Environmentalists and a lot of local communities hate hog farms. And it was evident that the North Carolina hog industry had to do something. They were about to be sued. So they struck a deal with the Attorney General. But they said, you know what? We're going to give you $18 million. You go out there and find a better technology than what we have. And if it's environmentally friendly, it's economically feasible, we'll adopt it. And so all of a sudden, but these technologies have to be approved by the county. And I was a postdoc working on. I was doing economic modeling for it. And here's what happens when you have a big event like that. They don't just bring in, well, they do bring in experts, but they bring a very diverse set. So you had, obviously, environmentalists. Some of you may be some of those people one day on a panel like this. People from the hog industry, bankers from local communities who made loans to hog farms and loans to people who didn't like the hog farms. Citizen groups, some of the North Carolina bureaucracies, some people from the university, and just some other people that were respected for their judgment, just regular business people, didn't really have to know anything about hog. You got a citizen group, and they're coming together, and they have to decide what technology North Carolina is going to use to raise hogs, North Carolina being the second biggest hog state in the country. First biggest in terms of baby pigs. Now, there were a lot of technologies that were really good. I mean, zero environmental impact. But were really expensive. And some environmentalists, and I'm not saying this bad about them, but they were doing their job. But environmentalists really liked it. It was really expensive. And they said, well, if we make them adopt this, it won't be that bad. Even though the hog companies will face higher costs, they can just pass it on to the consumers in the form of higher prices. After all, if consumers want environmentally friendly pork, they're going to have to pay a higher price. So they were making an argument that you could impose these big costs, which is just like a big tax on North Carolina hog farm, and everything would be okay because they would just pass it on to the consumer. I think that's wrong, wrong, wrong. And the way you get there is, in the end, our conclusion is going to be logical. You don't need an economics course to really know it, but it's something you really think through, things like demand curves, demand elasticity, that helps you understand a lot better. You're more likely to get that right. Okay, so you've got out your clickers, you've got your worksheets from last time. This first one is just asking you for a percentage change. This is just like number one on the worksheets from last time. And remember, we did this only one time before, but you can put in a number in D2L. You can just pick up your clicker, you type in 0.xx, and some places on there says, okay, is this the answer you want? And you click OK. If not, you delete it and start over. If you're having trouble clicking the answer, ask help from someone next time. Again, this is going to closely follow the supply and demand elasticity worksheet. Wednesday, the first question is going to be exactly like this, except the two numbers changed. I'm going to go ahead and click the 12-second timer. Is it okay for over there if I raise up one screen? Can y'all see it? Raise your hand if you think it's essential I keep both screens down. I know this may seem really easy, but 30% of you got it wrong, so I want to make sure that we're doing everything right. For the percent change in price, all I did was take new price minus old price divided by old price. That is 35%. This one's exactly like number 2, just in different numbers. Demand elasticity is -2 and price rise is 35%. What's the percent change in quantity demand? When I said I have a PDF file of this in today's announcements, when you open it up, it shows the question and it shows the answers. I don't think you need to. Okay, I'm going to start the 12-second timer. I'll wait. Okay, I'm going to start it now. On number 2 on the worksheet, this is the equation. What it tells us is that if we plug in the elasticity of demand, ED, and multiply it by the percent change of price, which was 35%, this elasticity is just a number you can multiply by the percent change of price, and it tells you how consumers will react. I'm going to use just 0.35 because it asks what answer between 0 and 1. So sales will fall by 70%. Okay. To answer this, you should be able to just look at number 4, or it might be under, well, we took some notes under number 2. Actually, yeah, under the question 2, we took some notes, and that gives you what you need to answer that. I'm going to start timer. Awesome. Exactly. But it's negative. That's what makes it less than negative 1. Like if it's negative 2, you're used to weights being a positive number and adding. Good. Number 4. I believe you may have taken some notes that, if you don't know this automatically, you'll be able to answer this under number 2. I'm going to start the timer. Very good. If you want to see why, if you look at number 2, the only way an increase in price will decrease purchases if the elasticity of demand is negative. If the elasticity of demand was ever positive, it would be like saying you charge a higher price for the exact same product and people buy more. Doesn't make sense. That's why elasticity demands are always negative. You've got a demand curve. Does that look to be an elastic or inelastic? Probably get that from looking at number 5. We'll start the timer. remembered, if I want to draw an inelastic demand, inelastic begins with I. I is just a straight line, so I want a demand curve that's like a straight line. For elastic, I want the opposite, something that's very close to being a horizontal line. Or if you look at, it starts with E, and E is kind of flat at the top. That might help you think of it like that. I figured that out on my own. Almost all of you got it. Good. The notes you took on the number 2 will probably help you answer. Start timing. Most of you still got it right. We said that elasticities are just a measure of consumer sensitivity to price changes. And we know that this is a elastic curve, demand curve, and if you like increase price just a little, there's a huge change in quantity. The more inelastic, and an inelastic demand, which has a low elasticity between 0 and -1, you increase price, move up the curve, and people buy almost the same amount. Well, the answer is less sensitive to price changes. Elasticity measures sensitivity. This is new territory. This is I think this is basically number 6, one we haven't done yet. So this is new. Why don't you look at it, read it, and see if you can get it on your own. Start timer. Good. And I'm building you up to that North Carolina hog farm example. Just ignore the words, you understand what's going on. You go to buy eggs. There's lots of different brands that basically all the same thing. If all of them are $2, but the price of one is $4, you don't buy the $4. You are very, very sensitive to that price change. The sales go to almost 0, and the price of just one brand goes up if it's not much different than the other. So you're very sensitive to the price change of one single brand of eggs. Very sensitive means more elastic. Highly sensitive to this price change. And the reason is, when the price of that one brand goes up, you have a lot of other options beside that one brand. Eggs, mostly an egg. You have alternatives. If it's expensive, you buy the cheaper option. Elasticities, it all boils down to alternatives. If you are diabetic and you need insulin, your demand for insulin is highly inelastic. You'll buy the same amount of insulin no matter what, because there are no alternatives to insulin besides diet. It's a similar question, but instead of one brand of eggs, we're talking about all eggs going up at the same time. You go to the store, there's a bunch of brands, but the price of all the brands have gone from 2 to 4. I'm going to pause after this one to make sure you have the right answer for number 6. Don't let me forget it. Okay, I'm going to start timer. Good. Now this does involve a little bit of judgment. This is one of those questions you kind of need to know what my answer is before you know what the economic answer is. Because, what does mildly mean? What does a few mean? Just take practice answering. A lot of times if you're baking something and it calls for eggs, there is just no substitute for eggs. Nothing really replaces eggs in a recipe. And so if the price of eggs, all eggs, goes from 2 to 4, you've got to bake a cake, you're still going to buy the eggs. Maybe you'll bake a little less cakes, but you will respond to the price change, but just not much. And that's why I say the price of all eggs goes up at the same time, we'll be only mildly sensitive to it, or very insensitive to it. And the reason is because when we're talking about all eggs, there's just few substitutes for eggs. Regarding the worksheet, last question I said we're basically doing number 6, so let me make sure you have the right answer for number 6 on the worksheets. Number 6 says, the demand for eggs in general is most likely to be inelastic, while the demand for a single variety of eggs is most likely to be elastic. So the answer is A, inelastic, elastic. Again, number 6 on the worksheet is supply and demand elasticity. The answer is A, inelastic, elastic. I know we just answered it, but do it again to help you remember. I can't make you. Start the timer. Kind of hoping we're closer to that 100%. That's okay. Now we're getting to pork. There's new regulation or tax, whatever. We're talking about something that is making hog production more expensive now. This decreases the supply. Remember, a decrease in the supply, you take the supply curve, and you either go up to reflect the higher cost, or you go left to reflect the lower quantity. Either way, you have this curve that's moving up and to the left like that. And we're saying suppose pork has an inelastic demand, what will be the effect of this shock to the pork market? Tax sort of regulation. Here's how I look at it, think about it. I'll look at the chart. I know it's a supply decrease, so I just imagine this curve shifting up like this. And you ask yourself, when this curve shifts up like this, is it having a bigger impact on price or quantity? Start timer. Remember the story about the tax on yachts in the 80s? What the politicians thought, they wouldn't have used these words, but they thought the demand for our yachts would be inelastic, where you could put a tax on it, supply decreases, and people still buy roughly the same amount. This is a picture of that curve actually shaping. We still have an inelastic demand. Supply goes from S to S prime. Equilibrium goes from the black circle to the red circle. We're making a big jump in price, but only a very, very small change in quantity, as 80% of you recognize. Exact same question. The only difference is that demand is elastic, very elastic. Start timer. Can't break that 90%. We'll keep trying. Very good. Most of you recognize this. The supply curve shift is exactly the same as before. I just cut and paste this graphic, supply and demand, but now with a very elastic demand, going from the old equilibrium in the black circle to the new equilibrium in the red circle, we're making a huge decrease in quantity, but it almost looks like price doesn't change at all. For next one, now think for a minute. You're on this panel, this citizen panel, a lot of different people there. We're talking about forcing North Carolina hog farms to maybe increase their production costs by 15%, which is astronomical in hog production. And you want to say, can North Carolina hog producers just say, well, I'll just charge you a higher price? And can they charge a higher price? It depends on whether North Carolina, the demand for North Carolina pork or hogs produced in North Carolina is inelastic or elastic. Now let me ask it this way. What the environmentalists were suggesting was that, well, people in North Carolina who produce pork, they can charge a higher price, and people who buy pork in North Carolina would just have to pay a higher price. But grocery stores, are there any alternatives to buying pork if you're in North Carolina than buying from North Carolina pork producers?
Yeah, they can import it.
Yeah.
States.
I was got plenty to say. Yeah. And so if we're thinking about people in North Carolina, they try to start charging a higher price, what happens to their sales?
But you're in North Carolina and they like their pork, so it may not matter.
But they'll just get it elsewhere. You got it right in the first place. You said the exact right answer in the beginning. And so I would think the demand for North Carolina pork would be very elastic, because you can go to other states to buy pork. whereas the demand for pork, all pork, produced anywhere, is probably kind of in that. And on this panel, it was interesting that I got to watch a discussion of this, and I saw some people explain why North Carolina pork producers can't just pass on the cost, why they have to charge the same price as everybody else in the U.S., and the other people understood it. And from that point on, the environmentalists who were on the panel were much less eager to pursue the really, really costly technologies. They were trying to look for something where that would be better for the environment but wouldn't increase hog production costs too much. Can y'all read the answers in the back?
A little bit.
I apologize, I should have been better. Tell my TAs to do it better next time. I'm sorry, my secretary. Is that secretary, right? Is that who was blaming?
Sure.
Yeah, we had a discussion about this.
He's secretary.
Oh, you're a TA?
I just want.
I'm going to start the way. I'm going to start the timer. Class, when you go to study for the final and you're wondering what should you study regarding this, what do you think you should study? This and the worksheets. It's that simple. Okay, I'll see you Wednesday.